Well, on the topic of Ukraine, there seems to be a growing risk now of a direct war between the Europeans and Russia. That is, the rhetoric has become increasingly belligerent. The Europeans are threatening to shoot down Russian jets. Russia is warning that this would mean war. And you had all these incidents. Allegedly, Russia sent drones into Poland, jets over Estonia. Of course, this has been combined with incidents such as, well, what they claimed was the scrambling of the GPS signals of von der Leyen's flight, which was proven to be a hoax. And a hoax the media got quite excited about, as this was the smoking gun. But anyways, there seems the whole eagerness of seeing or proving any Russian belligerence is a very concerning indicator on its own. How do you see this growing tensions? I said Europeans and Russia because the Americans seems to be wanting to sit this one out.
Yeah, I think that's a good characterization of what Donald Trump said. First, let's be sure that in the future, if they're going to scramble GPS signals for the aircraft that van der Leyen is on, please don't bring her to the United States. That's my one request. We can do without von der Leyen. Second point is, I went over today with some people in the Intelligence Committee, all of these accusations, allegations, you call them. There have been no Russian provocations whatsoever, none. The Russians have not violated anybody's airspace with their jets. They've been scrupulously careful, let's put it that way, cautious on the air defense identification zone and its borders. The Baltic states seem to have a permanent interest in dragging the United States into war on their behalf against Russia. And that was the comment that came through very clearly. The Poles seem to be in the same business. These 19 drones, several of them that were recovered that you could pull the SIM card out of, the SIM cards were Polish or Swedish. They weren't even Russian. So the supposition is this was a hoax created in Ukraine. In other words, a false flag. Now, I guess the Poles were part of it because the Polish foreign minister was quick to make all of these ridiculous threats against the Russians on the basis of a supposed violation that never happened. But Sikorsky's married to Anne Applebaum, and she's a card-carrying member of this globalist agenda crowd. So, it's all nonsense. The Russians have gone to great lengths to avoid any conflict with NATO and the United States. Now, we, on the other hand, have not been quite as scrupulous. But the point is, Mr. Putin is not looking for a war with us. Now, the rhetoric, and I think it's important that you bring that up. Does the rhetoric matter? Well, yes, it does. There's now a new call in Moscow for mobilization of 18 to 25-year-olds. So we're talking about a Russian military establishment that's already extraordinarily large and powerful and well-equipped, well-led, well-trained, now receiving fresh blood, if you will, making it potentially down the line even more dangerous. And this is really the result of everything that we in Washington and our friends in London have pushed on Europe. We've created the very thing that we said we didn't want. That Russian military establishment that exists today, which is very formidable, did not exist 3.5 years ago, as you know. It does now. It's very real. But we got to look at what President Trump said. It's very interesting. It looks like President Trump has abdicated his leadership of NATO to, quote unquote, others. He's effectively said, well, we'll sell you whatever you want. You can do with it as you see fit. That's your show, and we're going to effectively sit this out. Well, there are a couple of problems with that. First of all, I don't know how much money the Europeans have to spend. They may not be able to afford whatever it is that we're sending to them. Secondly, our inventories of missiles and radars and other things are down. Our production lines are not like Russia's. They don't hum 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a huge manufacturing base devoted to military power. So I'm not sure what it all means in the short run. It may not mean very much, but the globalists absolutely have to keep this going. All you had to do is look at the 800,000 British citizens on the streets of London. Look at the tens of thousands of French citizens in Paris. Look at the attitude of the broader electorate towards these globalists running their country. People that have opened the borders, people that want to change the laws, that are doing everything in their power to castigate, oppress their native population in favor of foreigners, and to effectively destroy national culture, national identity. That's the larger globalist agenda. If you listen to Hariri, who's the priest in the high church of globalism, it's very obvious. We used to call this Bolshevism. This is what Trotsky and Kamenev and Radek and the rest of them all dreamt of, erasing all of these identities, declaring everything as artificial constructs, which it's not. There's nothing artificial about language, race, ethnicity, religion, or culture. Those are real things. Those things define us as human beings. So you're having the European population, whether it's in Ireland or England or anywhere else, wake up and say, wait a minute, we didn't sign up for this. This is not what we want. And Russia, as we've talked about before, is the last bastion of a national state that refuses to assimilate into the amorphous mass of nothingness that the globalists want to create. So they're going to continue to push for confrontation, verbal or otherwise. But my point is, right now, they have nothing to bring to the fight. The Lilliputian armies in Western Europe are no match for the Russians. The idea of putting them on the ground in Western Ukraine is absurd. They can't sustain themselves for 100 kilometers. And the Russians will target them and destroy them if they do it. So I think most of the threats are just nonsense. It's designed to beef up morale, to create the illusion that Russia is a threat. It's not. And to try and divert and distract people from what's happening in their own countries, because the enemy that the Europeans have is inside their borders. It's not Russia.
You hinted towards the tweet or Truth Social post of Donald Trump, in which he argued that he finally understands the war in Ukraine and Ukraine is winning. Ukraine can take all its territory back. It can even take more, assuming he's referring to taking Russian territory. Russia is possibly a paper tiger. What do you make of this tweet?
Well, it's back to what I said before. He's not going to fight the battle with the Europeans over whether or not that's true. Obviously, that's all false. The war's effectively won on the ground in Ukraine. There's no question about that. The Russians are the ones exercising restraint. They don't really want to cross that river. But I do think they will take Odessa in the near term. And once they've done that, the question is, do they go up to the edge of the river and then plan on crossing into Kiev? I mean, Donald Trump is effectively saying, I don't care. It's not my problem. This is the issue. I mean, you hear all this nonsense about he's the leader of NATO, the largest alliance in the world. Well, he doesn't want to be the leader. He's made that very clear. Now, Prime Minister Orban spoke within the last couple of days, gave a very interesting speech in Budapest. And he said the Europeans need to be prepared to go to Moscow. That's where you have to go if you want to end this war. You have to realign your thinking. So you're going to have to go to Moscow. And he said, don't bother going to Washington. Nothing's going to change there. They're not going to help you. He's right. And I think privately, President Trump would like, over time, sooner rather than later, to move more and more forces in Europe out and back to the United States. I know he does. He'd like to do that in Northeast Asia as well. And we have an opportunity now because the new liberal nationalist government in Korea would very much like to see us leave. They're too polite to tell us to get out, but they will certainly facilitate that. And they want command and control of their own forces on the peninsula, which they should have had 25, 30 years ago. This is ridiculous. So these forces that are moving in the United States are moving away from confrontation with Russia. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. And if he sells them Standard Missile 6, essentially hypersonic attack missiles that can penetrate whatever they've got out there and lets the Ukrainians or their mercenaries or whoever operate these missile batteries, that's very dangerous. because it would be as though we were allowing the Chinese, for instance, to set up missile batteries in Mexico and launch against Phoenix, Arizona, or Dallas, Texas. No, that's outrageous. We would strike back. Well, the Russians will strike back if this nonsense continues. They try to attack Ryazan or Kazan or any number of different cities in Russia. So the danger is not past, but the reality is forces are moving in a direction that is actually advantageous to an end to the war, and he's letting the Europeans figure that out the hard way. So maybe a coalition of the willing will eventually emerge in Europe, and it has to include Germany to be workable, and it'll go to Moscow and put an end to the war. But right now, doesn't look good.